Hello, everyone, and welcome to the show. Filmed before a live studio audience. This is the Design Journal, episode 16. I can't believe this is our 16th Design Journal. So, look, we've got a lot of stuff to talk about today. Looking forward to chatting with all of you and sharing a lot of our cool updates and statuses, let you know what's going on and what it is that we're doing right now. So, let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to do a few things that I haven't done in the past. I just want to talk about a couple of just sort of nerdy things that I'm doing right now that I just kind of want to share with you guys. Now, first of all, I'm continuing to go through piles of books and games and systems so I can continue to research things. Also, I am reading this week Vegetius, an epitome of military science. It's a fantastic book written in the Middle Ages about for a king offering advice on building up your military, which all of it was then actually taken largely from older documents written during the Roman period. And so very, very cool first person account talking about how they battle, their weaponry, their gear, lots of very cool stuff here that I'm finding to build into games and gaming. So very fun. Also, mail call. Something that came in the mail this week is something I think you'll all appreciate, which from Super 7 are this gang here. Let's see if I can get the camera to focus in on them. Absolutely amazing action figures done in the classic style. How can you not love these? They're amazing. They're absolutely fantastic. And for those of you who don't know what they are, I'll just tell you they're from the covers of the old D&D books and the box sets. Fabulous, fabulous figures from Super 7. Just totally loving these. All right, let's see. What else did I have to tell you about? Yes, what I've been gaming as well. Obviously, I've been gaming. We play in a weekly game that we've been playing in for the last 30 years, I guess. Oh my God, it's been forever. Yeah, so what have we been playing? We have been playing Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay from Cubicle 7. This is, I think, the 4th edition of the game. Very cool game, percentile-based system. In terms of looking at how it works, it's a percentile-based system. It also does an interesting thing where you have this dynamic where you take the 10s from your target number and the 10s from what you rolled to develop success levels. So you can have the yes and yes but outcomes, which is a very cool thing that we talked about right here more than once. One thing I especially enjoyed were these. This is that the character sheets look like that came with the starter set. Fantastic job of putting key information that you need to play the game right on the sheet with you. No digging around and looking for it. It's all right there. A bunch of rules that you need. There were a few things that are missing that if someone ever asked me for my opinion, I'd give them some feedback on it. Like they didn't do a good job of explaining what the primary attributes are. So I had to kind of go look those up. But yeah, I mean, it's a very cool way to present the character sheets in a starter set. And it's something I think we can learn from, especially when we talk about our basic set and about not requiring people to go to the book, right? Because we've talked about that as being really important to us. All right. So let's see what else. Oh, and what have I been working on? I have new pens. I've been working on maps for my new pens. So that's been fun lately, is getting to work on those a bit. Turning out pretty good so far. I like it. Some Copic or Copic, I'm not really sure how you pronounce it properly, but pens that came in and they're working out pretty good. One of my goals is I'm using this so I can do a hand-drawn map for one of our Ataltis locations and present that on our Patreon. So I'm looking forward to putting that out there as well. The other thing that we've been working on outside of the Cool Name Goes Here work is I've been working on some new, well, I guess I can pull this down off the screen. We've been working on some plans for a book. I don't want to say too much about it just yet, but we're starting now and we'll be posting some more stuff about it later. Just keeping in mind that, I'm focused on this as our primary goal, but we still have our other products that we're putting out and we have other people who can work on those. So we're going to keep working on those. Oh, and just wanted to share, this is, we've been trying a bunch of new games in our weekly campaign. A lot of times we would play one game for a long time, like a lot of you, but right now we've been trying different games. Our list, though, is getting a little bit out of control. This is the list of games that I want to try out and play with our group. Even if we only played one a week, we're talking about probably a year just to get through these if we only played one every other week. So, yeah, I think it's probably a little bit of of a dream list of us actually getting through all of these. And we have some new stuff in there. Like one of the things I can't wait to play is Brindlewood Bay. If you haven't seen Brindlewood Bay, it looks very, very cool. It's about little old ladies solving crimes, which is just like a crazy idea for a role-playing game setting, but it just looks so cool. But with some older stuff too, like I want to run an AD&D second edition game. I only ever played first edition and the basic sets and expert, all of those. And then the later editions, somehow second edition got past me. I've got the books, I've read the books, but I never actually got to play in a game of it. So I'm hoping we'll get some of that in. But yeah, I just thought I'd share some of the games that we're playing. And all of this goes back to the fact that it's all useful in terms of helping us to create a really cool role-playing game. And so that's what we're going to talk about a little bit tonight. We're going to talk about some of that. So, as I mentioned to you guys, I did send out our initial documents, which have the what we're working name added up system to our consulting designers. Now, only to a small group of them, about 5 or 6 folks who had said they were interested in that portion of the design process. Everybody at the beginning, we gave them that survey and they told us what it is they were interested in and what they'd want to work on. And so the folks who are interested in those sort of early mechanics and dice mechanics, we sent it out to them. That includes folks like Matt Forbeck and Steve Long and Owen Casey Stevens and Eloy Lasanta, Crystal Mazur, Toya Finley, a list of very cool people. And we're already getting some feedback back. The initial response is very positive. And that's the number one thing I want to share with you guys is that the positive feedback is great. One of the things that they especially like is this concept that you can either just compare scores or roll dice, that the option is there depending on what you're trying to do with your campaign and your game, or with that moment, with that encounter, that you're not stuck with any certain type of resolution system, that you can use different systems as you're trying to resolve this. So yeah, that's been really good to hear. Also, some very fun discussions. Something came up with Toya Finley, and one of the things that she brought up that is something that came up on the Discord, and that was this whole idea of people being superheroes of a sort, right? That these characters aren't superheroes like Superman, but that their cool abilities are relatively almost magical in a narrative sort of way, right? Like Indiana Jones's luck, for example, or things like that, right? That you can create these cool ideas and bring them into these characters and build them out using these sort of special abilities that make each character unique. And then the idea that you can like build these out into power stunts is a very cool approach as well. So again, they were very happy with what they've seen so far. I'll be sharing more as we get more. I want to wait till I have the full gamut of feedback before I go there. But we'll be sharing more of that as we go along. So this week's discussion, this week I want to talk a little bit about attributes. So I have brought our handy dandy worksheet with us. And like I said, this is a design journal. It talks a little bit about what I've been doing, what I've been thinking about, how I've been working on things. And it's also a chance for you to sort of see the thought process that goes into all of this. So I want to just start. Let's go ahead and just start with our classics, right? Let's just go ahead. We've got, whoa, I did not mean to do that. Let me make this a little bit friendlier sized. Strength, dexterity, constitution, you guys know the routine, intelligence, wisdom, charisma. All right, so here's our classics, right? The classic 6, the ones that we all know from Dungeons and Dragons, if with some spelling errors, of course. Dexterity, there we go, with some spelling errors along the way, but you get the idea here. These core ideas that this is what makes up the character. Now, what we see, and as I went through those 50-some games that I shared a while back, when I went through them, I found that a lot of people didn't stray very far from this. People tended to stay pretty close to this set of abilities, which is interesting because I'm not necessarily certain that this set of abilities are the best package of abilities you can have to define characters. Strength makes sense, right? Dexterity, sure, you want to be agile, you want to know if you can balance on things. Your constitution, how tough you are, all good. Intelligence, wisdom. Charisma gets a little odd, right? Because one of the things that they tried to do in Dungeons and Dragons is say, hey, look, Charisma isn't just whether or not you're pretty or uh, someone who people like. It's kind of your presence, your force of will, your personality. That's great, but every time people see charisma, they struggle to see past it. For example, in the fifth edition based, was it fifth edition based? Someone can correct me. Of it might have been third edition based, but the Star Wars by Wizards of the Coast. One of the things they had was they talked about Darth Maul having a high charisma, right? This had come up as an example. That's great, except for the fact that it kind of doesn't fit with what people think of when they think of charisma. Charisma is almost always a positive thing. Now, one of the ideas that came out was this idea of what if instead of having these abilities, everything was a skill? So, in other words, strength represented strength training. Dexterity represented how much you've trained your ability to be dexterous. Maybe you start out with some mid levels to begin with, but each one of these is a skill. Now, from a realism and simulation point of view, I love this idea, right? It's very, very cool because it represents reality. If you don't move, if you don't work out, if you don't exercise, you're not going to be healthy and strong, and you're not going to have a decent constitution. You could even argue that there's some idea that intelligence and wisdom could suffer if you're not using your brain. The only challenge with that is that when you put something like these sort of underlying ideas and turn them into just skills along with starting fires and climbing cliffs, they start to overlap, right? And so you end up with this strange sort of overlapping tree of skills and abilities, and each one piles onto the next. And should it help that? And in the end, you kind of come back to the idea that really attributes are a pretty good idea in and of themselves. And so I do like this idea of attributes, but I do think that this could use some work. So one of the things that comes up every now and then is another concept. And this one is pretty straightforward. It kind of comes from thought that's been around for the human race for a very long time: body, mind, and spirit, right? So this is three core concepts of character. You have your physical form, your mental capacity, and then your spiritual essence. And I think that this is a very good set of attributes for a game that is set in a fantasy setting like our own. So this is something that we could work with. Now, the only problem I have with this is that I never feel like the personality piece of this comes through very well. Is it a mental trait, your personality? Is it a spiritual trait where you sort of just connect with people? You could argue that's the case, but it also, when you leave that out, you sort of turn the entire sort of social aspect of the game into nothing but a role play element. And either that or you're attaching it to something that doesn't quite make sense. So suddenly your really smart wizard is also very charismatic, or your spiritual guru also happens to be someone that everybody likes, which isn't necessarily true, right? So what could we do? Well, the thing that we talked about, and we've talked about it here before, is dropping in an additional ability here: body, mind, spirit, and presence. Presence represents your force of personality. You know, they talk about how certain movie stars, when they walk into the room, people just recognize that they're there. If you've never heard this, people talk about this all the time. Same with certain politicians. They have a presence about them that is difficult to ignore. And this is true a lot of times when people are meeting one of these folks in real life versus seeing them on television. They suddenly realize that there is a force of personality about them that is noticeable and present. So, what if we have presence? This idea of an ability that you use for things like trying to fool someone, to deceive someone, or to give a rousing speech to inspire people. I like the idea of having this as its own ability, because what it does is it creates four different types of characters, each one based on one of these concepts. You have your physical character, which might be someone who's either a strong warrior or a very agile and dexterous character. You have your intellectual character, the one who learns all the lore, who discovers the different languages, who understands the way that the world works and puts the pieces together. this is your fun Sherlock Holmes type of character, right? So you go from your Conan and Spider-Man or Gray Mouser characters to your Sherlock Holmes types of characters to your presence characters. These are the characters who simply have an incredible personality. They are the con artists. They are the fast talkers. They are the ones who come in here. They are the Ryan Reynolds of the role-playing game, right? These are the folks who have this incredible force of personality. And then you've got spirit. These are individuals who are tapping into some greater power within the universe, whether it's magic, whether it's divine power. These are things that we can build out in story elements, but the reality is this gives us a great way for this to exist. So I like these four. So far, this has gone over very well in response that we've gotten from our consulting designers, from folks that we've talked to. It's gone very well. I'm still waiting for some more feedback from consulting designers before we do our next survey, but we will be doing a survey. And I have actually written up a base set of testing rules, and I've been using them here. I still want to work out some more details of these, but very soon we'll be in a position to give some to you guys. So this is coming, but I am still working out some of the details here in a separate game that I'm running. So within this body, mind, presence, and spirit, there are different elements that we need to take into account. So let's just talk about body for a second. And if we say body, we have the idea of a physical strength, or you could say power, right? Thanks today to one of our folks over on Discord. Let me just pull up their name really quick. I think it was Callus who had a really good discussion of attributes today, that we had a good discussion about this in our brainstorm. Yeah. So Callus, or Kalis, I'm not sure how it's pronounced today, on our Discord had a great breakdown of these things. In fact, I'm going to share this really quick. I don't think they'll mind that I share it because it's actually pretty cool. And I want you guys to see this. It was a really cool breakdown, kind of like that skill wheel I showed you. Here, let's take a look. There we go. Yeah, so you can see Callus took these and broke them down into 4 areas. And the key concept here is that you have your power, your dexterity, your toughness, and your agility. And I just thought this was great. I'm not going to leave this up right now. We can come back to this another time. But just, if you go to the Discord, look for this. I think it's in the brainstorm area, the attributes area, where we talked about that today. So you have your power, which is how strong you are. You have your agility, which is how easily you can move your body and control your body move. You have your dexterity, although I kind of like things like manipulation or manual dexterity, right? It's a little tricky to decide what's the best way to do that one, I'm not really sure what you call it. You don't want to get one that's so long that you can't actually use it, but just for now, for our discussion purposes. And then you have your toughness. So here's the challenge I'm going to be looking to a lot of you to help with and to help us to figure out. One of the challenges here is that if we've got 4 abilities and we allow within the advanced rules to break this down further, you might end up with way too many attributes, right? 16 attributes. It's kind of crazy, right? We kind of lose control at that point. I'm not really sure that that's going to be useful. At the same time, I know that gamers like ourselves often don't mind that sort of thing. And as long as it's an option, it might be just fine, right? It might be perfectly fine to go that route. Also, there could be ways to play it where you only use the breakdown for body and you leave mind, presence, and spirit as is. Some people may not want to break out mind, presence, and spirit. They might be perfectly happy with those the way they are. So, we'll have to take a look at how we want to break things out in the game. It really depends on what sort of game you want to play, which things are important. Now, one possibility that I had considered is that what if toughness and your constitution isn't actually its own breakdown sub-attribute, but rather it functions as a average of the others. It could be a calculated attribute. That would be kind of cool because you get into the situation where you could have someone who puts their points into agility and not into power, but is still very tough because those points still count towards their overall physical fitness, right? Even if they're not necessarily strong. Think of it like the the wiry marathon runner, right? How do we represent that person? They're strong and they can keep going. They're quite agile, but do we need a separate attribute? So that's one of the things that we haven't solved yet. And I'm certainly going to be looking to all of you to give me your thoughts on that. So then the next question so looking at that. Now, the other thing that I want to note here is this breakdown. The reason for the agility versus manual dexterity. Personally, and this might just be me, but I think other people have agreed on this. I've always struggled with the idea that a person who can walk a tightrope also has excellent aim. That doesn't necessarily work, right? Just because you have good balance, just because you can touch your toes or do the splits doesn't immediately make you good at aiming. It doesn't necessarily make you good at, say, surgery, things like that, right? These sort of fine motion, these manipulation, the manual dexterity of the character. So I think it would be nice to sort of split that out. Now, maybe it's overkill. Maybe we don't need to split that out. Maybe at the end of the day, what we'd really need, and it would make more sense, let me just put this in here, would just be like power, agility and toughness. Maybe that's the better choice. I think we need to look at it though. I think we need to consider it because I do think the possibility is there for us to do something cooler. The other thing that I'd like to try to think about doing, and we've talked about this quite a bit, is this idea that you could add things on for one person, but not for another. So, for example, my character might end up looking like this, right? Body 2, power 3. And what that would mean is that my character has 2 for any other body type of action. But if it involves strength, and we might say strength, I'd say power because that was sort of the generalization, but we'll say strength 3. But if it involves strength, I'm a little better at that. And so what that would mean is that my character sheet may not look just like your character sheet. I may not have the exact same stats because none of that really matters to me. So I don't need to fill all that in. I love this idea. What we need to figure out though is how do we then combine that with our added up system? That's one of the challenges that I'm having today, which is however we break these out. Do you add 2 to 3? Do we make the strength a 1? But that's a little deceiving because now it looks like your strength is lower than your body, right? So that doesn't really seem to work. It's a tough question, and I don't really have the answer to it yet. Another thing we talked about was whether or not the attribute, whatever it is actually one of the things that you add up. Maybe it's just based on your skill. And this represents a maximum, at which point, if you go above this number, this represents your potential. If you go above this number, then you're talking about paying more for a skill at that point. And so that could represent your potential. And that's where the value of raising these are. Again, it's tough because then you get into the thing like, well, then how do you figure out encumbrance, right? Is it figured out off of strength if you're using encumbrance? Again, I know a lot of people don't want to, so we won't necessarily require that. But if we've got it, is it based off strength? And if strength is just a potential as opposed to how strong you are, it's tricky, right? And so I'm hoping that you guys will keep staying engaged in those conversations on Discord and on Facebook because there's a lot that we need to figure out in this area. But the thought of being able to create a character that is, to like this, where my character happens to be a physical. Whoa, I'm sorry, I went a little overboard there. There we go. My character might be just a physical character, right? A physical character that's strong and that's their shtick. And they have all these attributes. Meanwhile, a wizard might have a character that looks like this. So we could have someone who has a character like that, and that allows them to tweak their character to design the character they want to play. And I really like this idea. And I like the idea that in the most basic game, you can just keep it really simple. But as you get into the more advanced options, it allows you to start to tweak and design your character the way you want them to be. And so this could be a very cool way to do this. The other thing that I like, and I've talked about this before, and I'm going to mention it again, is I do like the idea that a GM doesn't need to try to remember every single skill and ability. He might say, you need to climb up the wall, make a body roll. Now, this character is going to, have one body, and they're going to be like, well, I got one body and I got two for my athletics. So I got a three. I look on the chart and I'm going to roll, I think it's a D8 or something like that. So, all right, great. This character, though, is going to be like, oh, well, I actually have strength. So I'm going to use my strength to climb up the wall if that's okay to GM. And the GM will say, yep, that makes perfect sense. And so they'll use their strength when they're adding things up. I like that a lot, that the GM, though, doesn't have to specify. Another person might have, instead of strength, they might have agility. So if the GM says make a body roll to climb the cliff, the character might say, I'm really agile. I'm going to use my agility to climb the cliff if that's all right. And the GM will say, yeah, that sounds great because you're, grabbing on and you can get close to the wall and everything. Awesome. Again, it makes things simple for the GM. All they have to say is make a body roll against a difficulty score of 4. And people then can work out how they're going to make that roll based on their character. At first, especially if you're using some of the advanced breakouts, it might take a little bit for people to get used to their character. But I think that over time, you'd very quickly learn your character, right? I've been gaming for a while. I've seen this, right? Sure, when you first start playing, it takes a minute to get through stuff and figure things out. But once you get through it, you're in good shape. And what I would like to see is that we've got a simple enough underlying mechanic right now that I don't think anyone is going to be trying to figure out the mechanic. They're going to know the mechanic. It's like, I just add everything up and roll those dice, right? And you're like, yeah, that's literally the whole system. So if that's the case, they can put more thought into things like, I wonder if I use my agility to climb this cliff instead, right? Coming up with these cool ways, these cool story elements on how you can get engaged in the story. And I really, really, really love that. I will say that ability to sort of choose agility versus strength or something like that does get in the way of the idea of this being a potential, which is again why I don't think we're going to go that direction. Be more interested to hear from everybody again on their thoughts on that. But yeah, I don't think that's where it's going to end up. But, we'll see. So this is what we're looking at. And I'm trying to figure out. I am very concerned about ending up with something that's too complex. It's just too much, right? I might be worried when I don't need to be, right? I mean, maybe something like this could completely work, right? That people would, and by the way, this is covering a lot of ground here. If you just look at like the 4 things in the one column, the third column over there, agile, dexterous, strong, robust, that gives an idea of what the 4 might be. These are just examples. I've posted other examples in the past, but maybe it's not too much. Maybe it's very cool and people would be excited about it, especially as an advanced function, right? I mean, that's what we have to keep reminding ourselves, is that there's a difference between the basic jump into the game, start playing, don't worry about it, have a good time, add stuff up, roll some dice, have a cool adventure. And I want to put in a little time crafting my character. And I think that's part of it, is that we do love crafting our characters. We want them to be more than just a throwaway set of stats or a rough general concept. It's fun to build that character yourself and make them yours. And I think that if we can come up with a way to do that and make it simple and intuitive, that level of complexity might not be a problem. So, folks, I'm keeping it to half an hour tonight. I'm going to try to be going for more of the half-hour presentation for a while. We're going to see how that works. In the meantime, thank you all for hanging out with me tonight. Hopefully you had fun seeing some of my recent mail calls and the books that we're looking at, the games we're playing. In the meantime, visit us on Discord. It should be in the description. You can find it there. Visit us on Facebook. Again, you can find the links. Like the channel and subscribe to it, please, because that helps to make sure that people can see it. And in the meantime, I hope that all of your games go great. And thanks again. We're going to keep plugging away, and soon we'll have a cool name game in the very near future. Talk to you guys later.